say it's always sunny in Philadelphia. I really don't know if that's true or not, that it's always sunny in Philadelphia. I would find that hard to believe. But we spoke with Philadelphia yesterday night. Tonight, we're speaking to Baltimore. Now, Baltimore, you and Philadelphia actually have something in common. You see, Philadelphia was getting shellacked. It was taking fire. Now this was back in 1776. You say, who was firing on Philadelphia? The Redcoats, the British. Philadelphia and a lot of other colonial settlements got destroyed by the British. Washington, Patrick Henry, Madison, they had to flee from Philadelphia. It was no longer safe. They went to one place, Baltimore. Good evening, Baltimore. This is the Purple People's Hour. This is stop number 3 on our Repair the Nation, Reparations Now tour. Baltimore was somehow able to hold out and weather the storm, the brutal assault. The British were like, this is it. We're coming up on Baltimore. We're taking everything. This is the end of this American thing they're running over here. Fort MacArthur, it held. And Francis Scott Keys is on a boat watching the bombs bursting in air. And he said getting through that night that the flag was still there on the fort. Baltimore, you withstood the storm, the fury. Baltimore, there's now another storm. It's just as ferocious, just as dangerous. It's a storm within us as citizens, within you as residents of the city of Baltimore. Apparently, it's come to our attention that there's 2 cities inside one city. There's a divide in one city. There's a divide making it 2 cities. There's a affluent, thriving Baltimore. And then there is a blighted, dilapidated, rundown Baltimore. Now, this didn't just start. This is not a new problem for Baltimore. This goes back to 1930s. And we're in 2022. So it's almost been a century of this kind of willful neglect in Baltimore. You're hearing all kinds of aspersions from all different types of characters, pointing fingers. And I would say it's not really productive during the midst of a crisis to really point fingers and say, this is not getting done because of you, or this is not being done because of these people in these positions. In fact, Baltimore, the story is vastly more complex than that. You see, the story starts back in 1930, during the Great Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided that, well, the best way to get out of this depression that the country was in was to afford Americans the opportunity to become homeowners. That was the way they could generate wealth. The only problem was that the only Americans that were included in this opportunity happened to be Americans who were white. 98% of all FHA loans went to white individuals for 30 years, up until 1968. And it only stopped in 1968 because there were race riots in every city after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Whose holiday we just recently celebrated. Now Baltimore. What happened was, in 1968, they came up with the Fair Housing Act. And that ended redlining. If you're not familiar with redlining, there's no other city that definitively defines what it is, where you can see the ravages that it left behind, than you, the city of Baltimore. Basically, it was a color coding scheme, where certain colors meant that you were going to build certain things, and other colors meant that you were going to leave it dilapidated. You wouldn't develop anything there. And specifically, the communities that were targeted for no building, no development, were communities that had the vast majority of foreign-born individuals and African American and black citizens of this country. This is a fact. And Baltimore, they were the lead architect of this that spread to many, many other cities across America. But Baltimore was the first city that did this. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have been to Baltimore, but they have something very odd going on when it comes to their roads, their freeways. You have a street in West Baltimore that you can use to get downtown or anywhere. And then they have a freeway. But the freeway is not complete. And it's very wide in width. Basically, you can't do anything because of this stupid freeway. And it goes nowhere. It's a freeway to nowhere. If you get on it, it's not even complete. And that's what West Baltimore has. Really obstructing it. I want you to think of it like this. You have a home. And you have windows. And right outside your home, when you open your window in your home, there's another home or house right next to you, blocking all your view. You can't see anything out your own window because the home is so close to your home. It's an eyesore. You're like, I can't see what's over the home. There might be a park over here. There might be a Walgreens. There might be a Whole Foods. But I can't see it because this stupid home is constructed right next to my home, blocking my view. It's so close to your home that when you open your front door, you can't even get out your front door. It's blocking you inside your home. So you don't have any access to go and get food. You're trapped in like a rat. You're like, who decided to build a home so close to another home? Whose bright idea was this? And you try to knock on the home next door to see if you can get the owner to tell them to demolish this stupid thing. But nobody ever answers. Nobody's home. This is the story of Baltimore. You say, urban people's out. Why would you bring up a home analogy? Baltimore has so many vacant homes. So many vacant buildings. Boarded up. A central problem that's been happening in Baltimore is that these homes have been catching fire. They're abandoned. They've been abandoned, in some cases, for decades. Now you say, purple people's out. This is an easy solution. The government there, it must be horrible. It's got to be the politicians' fault. They're mismanaging this shit. Throw them out. It's Democrat line. The Democrats don't know what they're doing. But remember, I told you this is a little bit more complex than what you're being told, or what you might think, or what your biases would lead you to believe. You see, this is not a problem that can be simply fixed by the government. Because it's not a government problem. It's actually a citizen problem. A private equity issue. A lot of the homes that are boarded up, vacated, decrepit, abandoned, they're owned by private owners. So even if the city did want to demolish them, which they have been wanting to demolish them for years now, you first gotta find the owner. And that's difficult to find. Because some of these owners don't do anything with their building. Then if you find out who the building belongs to, who owns the building, in certain cases, the owners have passed away. They're deceased. They're no longer on this realm. So then the family has to be contacted. Because it's technically the family's property. They have to go and find deed and the will. You see how that can be time consuming. We talked about pointing the finger, blaming. Baltimore, we need something new. We can point fingers and blame all day long. That's not going to solve the issue and the problem here. And we all know this. I think people want to point fingers and blame individuals, whom I might add are not responsible for this situation. Because that's easy. It's simple to do that. It takes no effort. Sure, it's unproductive, but it takes no effort. Everybody wants to say, well, crime is out of control in Baltimore. Well, violent crime is up a little bit. It's certainly nowhere near the peak levels that we saw in the 90s. But it is up a little bit, and it's concerning. And I can understand why policymakers, business leaders, would be concerned about that. But in that same vein, are those same individuals concerned enough to come together and do something about the situation that's at hand in Baltimore? That's to be seen. What we see is the finger pointing. We see, people wanting to blame the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, for the crime. The governor, a Republican, Larry Hogan, constantly going back and forth with the state's attorney in Baltimore, Marilyn Mosby. As though Marilyn Mosby had anything to do with redlining in the 1930s. As though Marilyn Mosby had anything to do with the freeway to nowhere. As though Marilyn Mosby had anything to do with the abandoned buildings of property owners who haven't done anything to them. No, that's what the governor wants to do. Blame a state's attorney who's decided that she doesn't want to prosecute individuals for selling marijuana. She doesn't want to prosecute individuals for being sex workers. She doesn't want to prosecute individuals who do petty theft. The state's attorney who made the decision to prosecute bad, corrupt, indecent, unlawful law enforcement officers in Baltimore. You know, that's really what they're upset about. That a state's attorney went against the thin blue line in Baltimore. You see, there's two Baltimores. I told you that at the beginning. There's the North and the South. It's seamless. Then there's the East. You got the park, the huge park. You got the university and the college areas. You got the commercial businesses. And then you go to West Baltimore. And you say, Purple People's House. What does West Baltimore have? Are you ready for this? West Baltimore. They have something very substantial. Something coveted by everybody in the whole city. Can you guess what that is? This is not a joke. They have one Burger King. You heard me. West Baltimore. They have a Burger King. You can get yourself a Whopper sandwich. Now an Impossible Burger too. But that's pretty much all you can get in West Baltimore. And then people want to talk about conditions that lead to violence. When individuals know full well that they've been neglected by their government, by the intellectual community, by the artistic community, by innovators and creators. That takes a psychological toll on you. People know when they're neglected. Nobody is stupid. Everybody in West Baltimore knows we're the place that has the Burger King. And if you go east, they have the universities, they have the art museums, they have the park, the swimming pools. They have easy access to downtown. We have the Burger King and the freeway to nowhere. We're not stupid. So if you know you've been neglected, I'm not justifying bad or misbehavior. It's a behavior of survival. You're going to do what it takes to survive. And survival doesn't require ethical behavior. It necessitates survival. West Baltimore and the residents, they've been perpetuated with a constant deluge of neglect, which has led to, instincts of survival. You say, what are instincts of survival? We live in a capitalistic system. It requires that you have money. It requires that you generate an income in order to eat and feed yourself and perhaps your family. The easiest way to generate an income when there's no commercial business is to do illicit activity. So people talk about gangs and drug dealing and crime. But they don't talk about why those things exist. They exist because there's nothing else there. Everybody can't work at the one little Burger King. Now you say, well, wait a minute. Why aren't there any developments in West Baltimore? Why is there no commercial businesses there? We go back to the freeway. Remember, I told you about the width. This thing, the freeway, is huge. It is wide. This takes up a lot of space. So if you have homes on one side and then homes on the other side of the freeway, where are you going to put the businesses? The construct of the freeway inhibits commercial property and businesses being constructed. Do you see how that has nothing to do with Mary Mosby? That has nothing to do with the Baltimore City Council. That has to do with things that predate those individuals and those people and that governance. Nowadays, people want to blame other people for things that they're not responsible for. And you can't talk about the things that other people were responsible for, because that causes discomfort. You can't say that it was white politicians and white architectures that built this stupid freeway, that went along with this stupid freeway, that segregated Baltimore. No, that's critical race theory. But it's not critical race theory to blame somebody that just recently got elected for all the issues and problems that lack of creativity and visionary concept created in the first place. You know, somehow that's good governance and conservative talking points to blame other people for things that they had nothing to do with. Baltimore. It's not like it's all bad news, because there's a lot of built-in good things in Baltimore already there. Even if you don't have the actual elements, you have the actual spirit in Baltimore. Whether you're in the east or the west, the north or the south in Baltimore, people feel pride in their city. They love their city. Some people have been neglected in the city, but they don't blame the city. They actually rep Baltimore. It's amazing. You have people in Sandtown. If you come in here, if I was to come into Baltimore, I'm addressing Baltimore. But if we were to come into Baltimore and just start insulting the city, even if I went to the most neglected place in Sandtown, in the city, we would get chased out of the city. They would say, you can't talk about Sandtown. You can't talk bad about Baltimore. You gotta go. So people have pride in Baltimore, even if it's been run down, even if it's decayed, even if they've been neglected. There's a great sense of pride in Baltimore. Now, that's called resiliency. And Baltimore seems to have a lot of it. So, this is a good thing. If your citizens are very resilient, if the residents of Baltimore are resilient, which is the case, then you don't have to worry about that being a factor. The only factor that's inhibiting the progress of Baltimore now is vision. And that's why other people can point fingers. Because they have no creativity, no vision. And their only recourse is to blame. Now here's a new rule for 2022. If you have nothing insightful to provide, nothing positive to lend to make a situation better, can you please do us all a favor and sit down and shut up? It's not productive to just blame. And then when we seek out a solution or ask you, what would you do? You give nothing. This is nonsense. It's counterproductive action. Even if you had no solution, I would go out and find an individual to generate ideas for you. This constant pointing the finger, blaming. The residents of Baltimore see this. And I think that's what frustrates a lot of residents. The blame. They could deal with staying the way it is. But people generally don't like being talked about negatively. And then no solutions are offered up. Can you imagine that? The residents of Baltimore every night on their TV screens, if they watch TV, hear how violent their city is. Hear how crime-ridden their city is. Hear how many vacant homes there are in their city. Hear about drugs in their city. Hear about prostitution in their city. And that's it. They're like, oh, that's it. They're not going to offer anything else. They're just going to talk about the bad. They're not going to talk about how, well, yesterday there were 2 dogs in the street and somebody saved them. They're not going to talk about the kids running down the street making TikTok videos and new challenges. No, they're not going to mention any of that shit. They're just going to hit you with a constant, steady stream of Baltimore. Look at how shitty you are. Baltimore, you're really shitty. The residents of Baltimore, you're criminals. Can you see why that might be a problem? If you accuse a person of doing something, whether they're guilty or innocent, they're like, you've already convicted me in a court of public opinion. You've already said that I don't have a shot, that I'm a complete toss away, that there's nothing to me. So why shouldn't I go out here and commit a crime? To the residents of Baltimore, I'm sorry that they continue to insult you. We know from the very beginning, when you faced adversity, you persevered. I strongly believe that they do this because they lack vision. The vision they had was a vision of exclusion, of segregation. And now that that notion has been challenged and done away with, they really don't have shit to offer besides criticism. when it's their vision that caused the decay in the first place. Maybe perhaps if you hadn't have built the stupid damn freeway, West Baltimore would be thriving. That's just a thought. Now the vacant homes. You say the property owners, they might be deceased. They might be holding on to the property in case something happens and they can resell it. A whole host of reasons. Look, at some point you gotta streamline the process. You gotta move things along. You give people a chance, enough time, and then you say, look, we gotta move. Things gotta change. So what I would say is, for all the homes that are vacant, boarded up, run down, abandoned, you send out notices to all the owners that you have on record of owning those properties if they're not owned by the city. You tell them they have 90 days to do something about these homes, or the city is garnishing them, and then the city can demolish them in 90 days, and you can start rebuilding something new. You gotta reimagine Baltimore, because the individuals who imagined it in the 1930s were segregationists. And if we say segregation is over, then you gotta reimagine Baltimore now. A non-segregated Baltimore. I don't know what's so hard to understand about when things are done in a certain time period. If it was stagnant and ignorance was the notion in the prevailing way, why you would continue doing those things when we've all decided that those things are no longer applicable in the society? It's like you're going off of 1930 shit and we're in 2022. Complete and utter nonsense, I tell you. That's why a lot of youth could just go, we don't even understand what's going on. It's like foreign to us. Believe you me, I have the same sentiment. I don't know. This is numbskulliness at its finest. Baltimore residents were incensed, upset at the lynching of Freddie Gray. And that's what it was. It was a lynching of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. You say, why use that type of terminology? It's important. It really is. You see, Baltimore, the city, it neglected from the very beginning Freddie Gray to the very end of Freddie Gray's life. Beginning to end, Freddie Gray was neglected in Baltimore. People want to look at the ending and say, oh, look how tragic the ending was. But the beginning was just as tragic. And you don't want to say anything about the beginning. Because the beginning dictates how the ending is going to be. So let me tell you the beginning. Freddie Gray grew up in a home that had lead poison in the walls. Many friends and families and community leaders knew that Freddie Gray suffered from environmental racism. He was disciplined as a school child. He never completed middle school. His mother was illiterate. She couldn't help him with reading and writing. She too was a victim of environmental racism, which led her to have a heroin addiction issue. Freddie Gray dropped out of school, started selling drugs and illegal narcotics, often a drug user himself. And when you have all of these things going for you in West Baltimore, you know who's there to prey on you like a vulture. Baltimore police, you know, the law and order crowd. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Baltimore police, but the stories are, well, they run the gamut. It seems like in Baltimore, when you're down on the ground, in handcuffs, if you're an African American male, white male police officers love to kick you in the face. It's a Baltimore thing. They just kick you in the face. This is known. This is factual. If you're on a bike and you're an African American in the city of Baltimore, the police can just drive up and get out of their squad car and throw you down on the ground with your bike. The residents of Baltimore, West Baltimore, despise the police with a passion. It's ACAB country in West Baltimore. And guess what? The police despise the residents of Baltimore. So there's the vicious cycle for you. The taxpayers hate the service they're receiving. And the public servants, they hate the taxpayers. Baltimore. Get this. Reagan, President Reagan, is telling Gorbachev in Russia to tear down the wall. You remember, he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. This is the same country that built a freeway to separate white residents from black residents in the city of Baltimore. You know, the first step to correcting a wrong is to acknowledge it. There's been no public declaration in Baltimore that what the white residents of Baltimore did to the black residents of Baltimore was wrong. There's no public acknowledgement of this. Why, I don't know. It's clearly evident. It's written down. It's written. It was the official policy of the construction of the city. To disenfranchise and discriminate against foreign-born and black residents of the city. Don't build anything in their areas. Don't invest any money. And then, if you tried to come into the suburbs, they just wouldn't let you. So we've got no official acknowledgement, Baltimore, of this wrong. We've got no fixing this issue over the course of the decades that it's been an issue. And we've got no compensation for the damage that this wrong caused. Can you see why residents of West Baltimore, Sandstown, can you see why they might be upset? Can you see why violence and illegal activity might be a thing that's appealing? And then you got the individuals who swear to take an oath to uphold and protect. Not do so when it comes to the residents of West Baltimore. They're seen as not being human, as not having any rights. So when you got all of that stacked up against you, don't fault anybody for not wanting to fly an American flag or sing a national anthem. Please don't. Because those are not the issues at hand here. The issue at hand here is willful neglect. Benign and sheer disregard for your fellow American citizen. Those are the issues at hand, and nobody wants to talk about. What they will talk about is what the national anthem, and whether we need two national anthems or not. Well, we have two cities inside of one. How long have people known about that? I find it curious and interesting that people will complain about having two national anthems, but won't complain about having two cities inside of one city. An affluent city for white residents, and a dilapidated city for black residents. But we'll talk about the national anthem. It's a lack of creativity and ideas. Apparently they're out of it. But Baltimore, that freeway, start being creative and thinking of innovative things. Start trying to reimagine what you want there. People in Baltimore, whatever area of Baltimore, they love art. Art, whether it be drawing, murals, dancing, singing. Maybe it becomes an art district where artists come and perform. It's a big enough space and you can socially distance. And you can have food trucks lining the freeway. It's easy enough to get food trucks and park a food truck on the freeway. You can have open air concerts and performances. People will come from all over the country to the freeway that goes to nowhere to hear performances and eat finest foods. You gotta think about a new type of Baltimore. That's the thing. People don't want to generate new ideas. They're stuck in the past. It's good to understand the past. It's indicative of where we come and where we might go. But if you have nothing creative to offer at this point, like I said previously, please sit down and shut up. It's not constructive. It's not helpful to the residents of Baltimore. Are you setting up any mutual aid for the residents of Baltimore to get them off the street? No. Are you providing any internships for the residents of Baltimore to teach them new skills? No. Are you opening up any new facilities in West Baltimore to employ the residents of West Baltimore? No. So you're not doing anything productive. It's only counterproductive. It's only adding on to the misery. Now, the violence. Violence is not easily solved. It never has been. And violence has always been a thing on this continent. Even before the settlements, the indigenous tribes were at war with the indigenous tribes. All types of disputes. So this notion of violence being somehow a modern problem in urban settings is complete and utter bullshit. Please spare us. Violence requires creativity. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. Because people are not creative. So they just say, we want the violence to stop. And the rest of the page is blank. I'm like, well, is there any strategies that you want to employ to stop the violence? It's crickets in the room. It's like, if you tell people, you should stop doing this immediately, they're going to go and look at you and be like, what do you want me to do if I don't do this? And if I stand there and look at them and don't say anything, they're going to be mighty upset. And that's what people do all the time. You should stop the violence. And you go and you ask, what do you want people to do if they're not being violent? They have no solution. I don't know. Complete and utter lunacy, I'm telling you. No, it can't just be stop violence. There has to be some other component to it. My component, as I said before, the only way to repair this nation is through reparations. You say, well, wait a minute. You would give people money who've never had it before and will have issues. Yes. Yes to all of those things. You say, well, isn't that counterproductive? No. You see, when people are not in survival mode anymore, It lends itself to creativity. Now the people don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. They might not have to rob the McDonald's down the street. They'll be able to afford the Olive Garden 2 blocks away or downtown. It also does something else. People can start building what they want to build because now they have the money to do it. They have the resources. They can afford to do it. So no, this whole notion of, well, if you give people money, they'll just waste it. I don't know where that mindset comes from. Nobody thinks like that, except for when it comes to giving individuals who are poor and neglected in our society money. Then all of a sudden you have the, oh, it will be wasteful. Nobody thinks when a rich person buys a Lamborghini that that's a waste. Nobody thinks when a rich person buys a yacht, that's a waste. Baltimore, you're owed the money. It's your money. There was discrimination in the law and in practice. You know, I mentioned it in Philadelphia and Tulsa. In 1862, Lincoln gave Washington, D.C. slave owners reparations, $1 million. Baltimore, they can do the same for you. Faced with adversity in Baltimore, you'll work. Thank you, Baltimore.